Sometimes, the difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary destiny lies in one simple truth. People don't fail because they are weak. They fail because they don't understand their motivation. This story reveals the hidden secret that can transform anyone, even the most unmotivated person, into someone unstoppable. A secret that changed one young man's life forever, and might change yours too. Ethan sat on the edge of his small bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of his room. He was 19, full of dreams, yet empty of motivation. Every time he tried to start something, studying, working, exercising, he quit after a few days. His notebooks were full of unfinished plans. His phone was full of unstarted goals. And his heart was full of frustration. That morning, his mother knocked gently on the door. "Ethan, are you awake?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She already knew he would still be lying there, unmotivated, stuck in his thoughts again. She opened the door slowly. "You had so many dreams when you were a child," she said softly. "What happened to them, my son?" Ethan looked away. He didn't know what to say. He wanted to change. But motivation never lasted. His mother sighed, walked toward the window, and opened the curtains. Sunlight filled the room. "Tomorrow," she said, "you will go visit your grandfather in the mountains. He wants to speak to you. He says, he knows a secret you must learn." Ethan frowned. "A secret?" She nodded. "A secret that helped him succeed when he had nothing. He said it may help you too." Ethan didn't believe in secrets. But something in her voice, something in those words, woke a tiny spark inside him. For the first time in months, he sat up. "What secret?" he asked quietly. She smiled. "That is for him to tell you." Ethan didn't know it yet. But this journey would change everything. The next morning, Ethan stepped onto the old bus that led to the mountain village. The sky was still gray, and the air smelled like cold dew. He carried only a small backpack, and a heart full of questions. As the bus moved, Ethan looked out the window. Fields stretched endlessly, and tiny houses passed by like memories of a life he didn't understand. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. Everyone seemed to have purpose. But he didn't. After 2 hours, the bus stopped at a narrow dirt road leading into the mountains. The driver turned to him and said, "Last stop, young man. Your grandfather's house is up there." Ethan looked at the steep path. It was long, rocky, and exhausting just to look at. He sighed. "I'm already tired." But he started walking. Step after step, he climbed. His legs burned. His breath grew heavy. Halfway up, he stopped and leaned on a tree. "This is too much. I can't do it." A voice came from behind him. "Ah, so you're ready to quit already?" Ethan turned. There stood his grandfather, leaning on a wooden cane, smiling gently. "Grandpa? How did you?" "I knew you would stop here," the old man said. "You always stop at the first sign of discomfort." Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks. It was true. His grandfather walked slowly toward him. "Come," he said. "Follow me. I have something important to show you." Ethan hesitated, then followed. As they climbed together, Ethan asked, "Mom said you have a secret for me. A secret to succeed when motivation is gone. His grandfather nodded. Yes. And today, you will learn the first part of it. Ethan's heart beat faster. For the first time in a long time, he felt curiosity. He felt hope. He felt alive. Ethan followed his grandfather up the final steps of the mountain path. At the top stood a small wooden house, old but warm-looking, surrounded by tall pine trees that whispered in the wind. His grandfather pushed the door open. Come inside, Ethan. There's something I want you to see. The room smelled of old paper and wood. Shelves filled every wall, shelves packed with journals, notebooks, sketches, and unfinished plans. Ethan blinked. What is all this? His grandfather gave a small smile. This, he said, is the room of forgotten dreams. Ethan stepped forward, confused. These are yours. The old man nodded slowly. Yes. All the goals I started, but never finished. Ethan looked around in shock. There were hundreds of notebooks. Grandpa, I thought you were always disciplined. I thought you always knew what you wanted. His grandfather laughed softly. Oh no, my boy. I was just like you. No motivation. No consistency. No direction. He walked to a dusty journal and opened it. Here, he said, pointing to the first page. Day 1, I will become a carpenter. He turned the page. It was blank. Then he grabbed another notebook. Day 1, I will start a farm. Again, only one page filled. Ethan stared, surprised. But, you became successful. Everyone says so. His grandfather closed the journal gently. Yes, Ethan. But not because I stayed motivated. Motivation disappears. It is the weakest thing a man can rely on. He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. The reason I succeeded is because I discovered something stronger than motivation. Something that never fades. Ethan swallowed. What is it? But his grandfather didn't answer. Instead, he pointed at the hundreds of unfinished notebooks. Tonight, you will sleep here, he said. And tomorrow, we begin. Ethan frowned. Begin what? The old man smiled deeply. Your transformation. Ethan woke up early the next morning, surrounded by the silent witnesses of his grandfather's past. The old notebooks, the failed attempts, the abandoned dreams. He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Outside, the sun was barely rising, painting the sky with soft orange light. Suddenly, the door opened. His grandfather stood there, holding two heavy buckets filled with water. Good morning, the old man said. Today, we begin your first lesson. Ethan blinked. Lesson? About motivation. His grandfather chuckled. No, Ethan. Lesson about life. He set the buckets on the ground in front of him. Pick them up. Ethan tried lifting them. They were extremely heavy. I can't carry these. They're too much. His grandfather shook his head. That word, he said slowly, I can't, is what destroyed half the dreams in this room. Ethan looked down, embarrassed. But what does this have to do with success? The old man walked to the window and pointed at the long path outside. "Your task," he said, "is to carry these buckets down the hill and back up again." Ethan felt his heart sink. "That's impossible." Without answering, his grandfather took a small stick and drew a single line on the dusty floor. "This," he said, pointing at the line, "is the border between who you are and who you want to become." He looked at Ethan firmly. "And today you will cross it." Ethan hesitated. His hands trembled slightly as he grabbed the buckets again. His grandfather watched silently. Why do I have to do this?" Ethan asked, frustrated. "I came here to learn a secret, not carry water." The old man's face grew serious. "Exactly," he said. "You came here looking for motivation. But you'll leave here with something far greater." He stepped closer, his voice low and powerful. "Discipline. The only force stronger than motivation. And the key to success." Ethan froze. For the first time, he understood that this wasn't a test of strength. It was a test of will. He lifted the buckets again, tighter this time, and began to walk. One step, then another, then another. And his transformation had officially begun. Ethan walked down the mountain path with the heavy buckets in each hand. The water inside them swayed with every step, splashing against the metal. His arms were shaking. His shoulders burned. His breath grew short. But he didn't stop. Behind him, his grandfather followed slowly, observing without a word. Halfway down the hill, Ethan dropped one bucket. It hit the ground with a loud clang. Water spilled everywhere. Ethan leaned forward, exhausted. I can't do this," he gasped. His grandfather stepped beside him. "You think pain means stop," the old man said calmly. "But pain only means one thing. You are growing." Ethan looked up, confused and frustrated. "But it hurts." "Of course it hurts," his grandfather replied. "Everything meaningful hurts in the beginning. The gym hurts. Studying hurts. Waking up early hurts. Even becoming a better version of yourself hurts." He pointed at Ethan's trembling arms. "Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your instructor." Ethan swallowed hard. "But I don't feel motivated." The old man chuckled softly. "Good. Because motivation is a visitor. It comes and goes as it pleases. But discipline is a loyal friend. It stays, even when you don't want to continue." He lifted the fallen bucket and handed it back to Ethan. "Try again." Ethan hesitated, then grabbed it. His arms screamed. His back burned. But he walked. Step by step. Tears formed in the corners of his eyes. Not from sadness, but from the shock of realizing just how much he had given up in his life. At the bottom of the hill, he finally set the buckets down. He collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. His grandfather sat beside him. "You see, Ethan, success is not about feeling ready. It's about moving forward even when you don't." Ethan stared at the dirt path, exhausted but strangely proud. For the first time in years, he had finished something hard. He didn't know it yet. But this simple task was unlocking the strongest version of himself. Ethan and his grandfather began walking back up the hill. The path was steep, and every step felt heavier than the last. But this time, Ethan didn't complain. He didn't say, "I can't." He simply pushed forward, breathing hard, sweat running down his face. When they reached the top, Ethan dropped the buckets gently and sat on a rock. His muscles were shaking. He felt like collapsing. His grandfather stood quietly beside him, watching the sky. After a long silence, the old man finally spoke. "Ethan, do you know why you stop every time life becomes difficult?" Ethan shook his head. His grandfather turned toward him, eyes wise and sharp. "It's because you ask the wrong question." He paused. "You ask, do I feel motivated? And when the answer is no, you do nothing." Ethan looked down, ashamed. It was true. The old man knelt in front of him. Successful people do not ask, "Do I feel motivated?" They ask one single question. He tapped a finger on Ethan's chest. "What is the next step?" Ethan blinked. "What the next step?" "Yes," his grandfather said firmly. "Not the whole journey. Not the whole dream. Just the next small step." He pointed at the path. "When you carried the buckets, you were thinking about the entire hill, and that crushed your mind." He smiled. "But when you focused on one step at a time, you reached the bottom." Ethan felt something shift inside him, a quiet, powerful click in his mind. "So you're saying, I don't need motivation to succeed?" His grandfather shook his head. "No. You need something much simpler, and far stronger." He raised one finger. "Consistency in tiny steps. Every day. Even when you don't feel like it." Ethan sat still, absorbing every word. This was different from anything he had heard before. His whole life, he thought success was about motivation. About feeling ready. About being inspired. But now he understood. Success was built on small steps, repeated without excuses. His grandfather looked at him with a warm smile. "And tomorrow, Ethan, you will take your next step." The next morning, Ethan woke up before sunrise. A faint, cold light drifted into the small wooden room. His body was sore. Every muscle ached from yesterday's lesson. But something was different. For the first time in a long time, he didn't stay in bed. He didn't wait for motivation. He didn't scroll on his phone or think of excuses. He simply stood up. Outside, his grandfather was already sitting on a low stool, sharpening a small wooden stick. "You're awake early," the old man said without looking up. Ethan nodded. "Yes. I want to start." His grandfather smiled gently. "That is the first sign of change, Ethan. When you act without waiting to feel ready." He handed Ethan the same heavy buckets from the day before. "Again?" Ethan asked, surprised. His grandfather nodded. "Yes. Again. And again. And again. Not because you enjoy it, but because discipline is built through repetition." Ethan took a deep breath, lifted the buckets, and stepped onto the path. This time, he didn't complain. This time, he didn't hesitate. This time, he didn't look at the whole hill. He focused on one step. Then another. Then another. About halfway down, his arms began to burn again. But instead of stopping, he asked himself the question his grandfather taught him. What is the next step? And he took it. At the bottom, he set the buckets down with a sense of pride. When he climbed back up, he found his grandfather waiting with a thoughtful look on his face. "You're learning," the old man said. Ethan exhaled, breathing heavily. I'm trying. His grandfather shook his head. No, Ethan. You're committing. That is different. He sat beside him. Trying is something people do when they expect to fail. Commitment is what people do when failure is no longer an option. Ethan looked toward the horizon, where the sun was rising over the mountains. Something inside him felt stronger. I want to change, Grandpa, he whispered. His grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder. And you will. Because change begins the moment effort becomes your habit, not your struggle. For the first time, Ethan believed it. After breakfast, Ethan's grandfather led him behind the house to a small shed. The wooden door creaked as the old man pushed it open. Inside, the walls were covered with dozens of small wooden plaques. Each one had a single word carved into it. Ethan stepped closer. He read them aloud. Too tired. I'll start tomorrow. It's too hard. I don't feel ready. People will judge me. He frowned. These are excuses. His grandfather nodded. Yes. This is the wall that destroys most people's lives. Not failure. Not lack of time. Not lack of talent. He tapped one of the plaques. Excuses. They are the quiet killers of dreams. Ethan swallowed. So you made all these excuses too? The old man laughed softly. Oh, Ethan. I made every excuse in this room, many times. But one day, I realized something important. He picked up a plaque that said, I'm not motivated. This excuse, he said slowly, is the most dangerous of them all. Ethan looked puzzled. Why this one? His grandfather held the plaque up to the light. Because people believe it. They think motivation should come first. And only then will they act. He shook his head. But motivation does not create action. Action creates motivation. The words hit Ethan like a bolt of lightning. The old man stepped closer to him. If you wait to feel motivated before moving, you will spend your whole life standing still. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He remembered all the times he had waited for the perfect mood, the right energy, the good moment. None of those moments ever came. His grandfather handed him a hammer and pointed to an empty spot on the wall. Now, Ethan, carve your own excuse. The one that has stopped you the most. Ethan hesitated. Then slowly, he carved the words. I'll start later. When he finished, his grandfather took the plaque and hung it on the wall. Good, he said. Now look at it, and understand that every excuse you write here becomes your prison. But every excuse you break becomes your freedom. Ethan stared at the wall, feeling something deep shift inside him. For the first time in his life, he didn't see excuses as reasons. He saw them as enemies, and he was ready to fight them. The following morning, the sky was dark. Heavy clouds gathered over the mountains, and the wind blew cold against Ethan's face. He stepped out of the house and felt an immediate sense of heaviness. Not in his body this time, but in his mind. For the first time since arriving, he woke up feeling empty, drained, unmotivated, irritated for no clear reason. He stood on the steps, staring at the buckets waiting for him. His grandfather walked out slowly and noticed his silence. "You don't want to do it today," the old man said gently. Ethan shook his head. "No, I really don't." His grandfather nodded calmly, as if he had expected this. "Good." Ethan looked up, surprised. "Good? Why good?" The old man leaned on his cane. "Because today is the real test. Anyone can work hard on the days they feel inspired. But the days when you wake up tired, discouraged, unmotivated, those are the days that decide your future." Ethan sighed, rubbing his face. I don't feel like it today. I feel off." His grandfather smiled kindly. "That's how it begins for everyone. But listen, Ethan." He tapped his cane 3 times on the wooden steps. "Your feelings are not your leaders. They are only guests. Some stay a little longer, some leave quickly. But none of them are in charge of your life." Ethan felt a strange warmth in his chest. "But Grandpa, what if I fail?" The old man laughed softly. "Then fail. But fail while moving. Fail with your feet on the path, not in your bed." He pointed at the buckets. "Pick them up." Ethan hesitated. His mind screamed to stop, to rest, to take a break, to skip just one day. But he remembered the wall of excuses. He remembered the borderline his grandfather had drawn. He remembered the pain that taught him, the lessons that shaped him. He closed his eyes, exhaled, and grabbed the buckets. They felt heavier than ever before. Halfway down the path, Ethan suddenly stopped. His grandfather watched him from a distance and called out, "What is the next step, Ethan?" Ethan whispered to himself, "Just one more." And he took it. Then another. And another. When he reached the bottom, he was shaking, not from weakness, but from pride. Because today, he won a battle far more important than all the others. He had defeated the version of himself who always quit. And that victory changed something deep inside him. He climbed back up, breathing hard. His grandfather met him with a proud smile. "You see, Ethan, the day you feel the least motivated is the day you must act the most." That evening, after dinner, Ethan and his grandfather sat outside near a small fire. The crackling flames sent sparks dancing into the cold mountain air. Ethan stared into the fire, exhausted but proud of what he had accomplished that day. His grandfather picked up a small stick and drew 2 shapes in the dirt. One was large and dark. The other was smaller, lighter. "Ethan," he said, "do you know the story of the 2 wolves?" Ethan shook his head. "No, Grandpa." The old man smiled and began. "Inside every person, there are 2 wolves fighting for control. One is weak, lazy, full of excuses, fear, doubt, and hunger for comfort. This wolf is loud, and always wants the easy path." He pointed to the darker drawing. "This is the wolf that wins when you quit." Then he pointed to the lighter one. "And the second wolf is disciplined, courageous, consistent, and committed. It wants to grow. It wants to achieve. It wants to reach your full potential." Ethan listened carefully. His grandfather continued, "These wolves fight every single day. And do you know which one wins? Ethan hesitated, thinking, the stronger one? His grandfather shook his head. No, my boy. The one you feed. Ethan's eyes widened. The old man tapped Ethan's chest gently. When you skip your responsibilities, when you choose comfort, when you give up after the first difficulty, you feed the wrong wolf. He leaned closer. But every time you take one step forward, even tired, even discouraged, even unmotivated, you feed the wolf that will take you to your greatest future. Ethan looked at the drawings again, his heart pounding with a new understanding. So, every day, I choose which wolf wins. His grandfather nodded. Exactly. Success is not a miracle. It is a consequence of daily choices. The fire crackled louder. The mountain wind grew colder. But inside Ethan, something warm was growing, a strength he had never felt before. He whispered, I want to feed the right wolf, Grandpa. The old man smiled proudly. And you will. Because today, for the first time, you truly understand the battle inside yourself. Ethan stared at the flames, seeing his future differently. Not as something far away or impossible, but as something he could build, step by step, choice by choice. The next day, Ethan woke up with a strange feeling, not excitement, not motivation, but clarity. He stood up, stretched his sore muscles, and stepped outside. His grandfather was sitting on a wooden bench, holding a cup of steaming tea. Without saying a word, Ethan picked up the buckets. His grandfather raised an eyebrow and smiled. No instruction today? Ethan asked. The old man shook his head. No. Today you act on your own. That is the real test. Ethan took a deep breath and headed down the hill. This time, the buckets felt heavy, but his mind felt light. He moved with purpose. Not fast, not perfect, but steady. When he returned, his grandfather looked at him with quiet pride. Tell me, Ethan, he said, how did you feel doing the work today, without anyone pushing you? Ethan thought for a moment. Honestly, I didn't feel motivated, but I felt responsible. His grandfather nodded firmly. That, my boy, is the difference between those who dream and those who succeed. He stood up and walked slowly toward the edge of the hill. People believe motivation creates success, he said, gazing at the mountains. But the truth is... He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Responsibility creates success. The responsibility to show up, to act, to do what must be done, especially on the days you feel nothing. Ethan absorbed the words deeply. The old man continued. Everyone wants to succeed. Everyone wants a better life, more money, more strength, more discipline. But only a few understand this truth. Winners are not the most motivated. Winners are the most responsible. Ethan lowered his head, thinking about all the years he had wasted waiting for motivation. Waiting for the right feeling, the right moment, the right mood. He whispered, almost ashamed. So all this time, I wasn't weak. I was just irresponsible. His grandfather smiled softly and lifted Ethan's chin. No, Ethan. You were simply uninformed. No one ever taught you the real system of success. Now you know. The wind blew gently through the trees. Ethan felt something powerful awaken inside him, a new identity, a new mindset. His grandfather looked him in the eyes. "Now, Ethan, you are ready for the real secret. The secret behind every great life." Ethan's heart raced. "Tell me, what is it?" The old man took a slow breath, then spoke with calm certainty. "Your life rewards what you repeat." Ethan froze. "My life rewards what I repeat?" "Yes," his grandfather said. "You become what you do consistently, not what you do occasionally. Your habits shape your destiny." He placed both hands on Ethan's shoulders. "And now, my boy, it's time for you to build the habits that will build your future." That afternoon, Ethan's grandfather led him to a small wooden workshop behind the house. Inside, there was only a table, a chair, and a single candle placed in the center. The old man motioned for Ethan to sit. "Today," he said, "you will learn the habit that builds all other habits." Ethan leaned forward, curious. His grandfather lit the candle. The small flame flickered gently. "Watch it," he said. Ethan frowned. "I don't understand." "Just watch." For a full minute, Ethan stared at the tiny flame. It didn't move. It didn't grow. It didn't rush. It simply stayed lit. After the silence, his grandfather spoke softly. "This candle is discipline, Ethan. Quiet. Simple. Unexciting. But powerful enough to light an entire room. If it stays lit every day." He then pointed at the melted wax dripping down the side. "This melted wax is consistency, the proof that the flame has been burning, little by little." Ethan nodded slowly. "So the flame is discipline, and the wax is consistency?" His grandfather smiled. "Yes. And together, they create your future." He then blew gently. The flame went out instantly. "Motivation," he said, "is like this." He lit the candle again. A sudden spark, bright and quick. But it disappears just as fast. Ethan watched carefully. His grandfather continued. "Every successful person you admire, every athlete, entrepreneur, leader, they didn't build their life by waiting for sparks." He tapped the unlit candle. "They built it by keeping the flame alive. By doing the small things, every day without excuses." Ethan swallowed. "So what is the habit that builds all other habits?" His grandfather leaned closer and answered. "Showing up. Even when you don't feel like it." Ethan felt the words hit deep. His grandfather continued. "1 push-up a day. 1 page read. 5 minutes of study. 1 small task done." He raised a finger. "Not perfect. Not impressive. Just done." Ethan felt his chest grow warm with realization. "This is the secret, isn't it?" he asked quietly. "The secret to not losing motivation?" His grandfather nodded. "Yes. Because when you show up every day, even for a little bit, your identity begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who quits. You start seeing yourself as someone who keeps going." He pointed at Ethan's heart. "And once your identity changes, your life follows." Ethan breathed in deeply, overwhelmed by the simplicity and power of the lesson. "Grandpa," he whispered, "I think I'm finally starting to understand." The old man smiled, proud. "And that is why tomorrow, we begin the final lessons." The next morning, Ethan woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The air was crisp, the mountain silent, and his mind clear. He stepped outside to find his grandfather standing at the edge of the hill, hands behind his back, watching the rising sun. Without turning around, the old man said, "Ethan, today we begin the final lessons. Not about the body, but about the mind." Ethan joined him, standing quietly beside him. "Tell me," his grandfather asked, "what is the hardest part of success?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Starting." The old man shook his head. "Starting is easy. Everyone starts. Millions start. But very few finish." He turned toward Ethan, his eyes sharp. "The hardest part of success is staying on the path when no one is watching." He paused. "When there is no applause, no reward, no excitement, no motivation." Ethan lowered his head. It felt painfully true. His grandfather pointed at the hill Ethan had climbed so many times. "You carried those buckets because I was here. Because someone gave you the task. But soon, Ethan, you must carry them when nobody tells you to. That is real strength." He motioned for Ethan to sit on a nearby rock. "There are 3 final truths you must learn," the old man said, raising 3 fingers. 1. Success is built in silence. While others sleep, you improve. While others complain, you move. While others talk, you act. He tapped the rock gently. "Silence is where warriors are made." 2. You cannot control your feelings, but you can control your actions. The world belongs to those who act regardless of how they feel. He pointed at Ethan's chest. "Your emotions are guests, Ethan. Let them pass. But never let them drive." 3. Your life changes the moment you decide that excuses are no longer acceptable. Not sometimes. Not on good days. Every day. Ethan felt chills pass through him. The words were simple, but they hit deeper than anything he'd ever heard. His grandfather placed a hand on his shoulder. "These 3 truths will guide you when you return home. Because soon, your training here will end." Ethan's heart tightened. "End? Already?" The old man smiled warmly. "Yes, my boy. Because the goal is not for you to live here forever. The goal is for you to live differently when you leave." Ethan swallowed hard, suddenly realizing he wasn't the same person anymore. He wasn't the boy who quit. He wasn't the boy who waited for motivation. He was becoming someone new. And tomorrow, he would face the lesson that would decide everything. Ethan woke up before the dawn. The air felt heavier than usual, as if the mountain itself knew today was different. He stepped outside and found his grandfather waiting at the top of the hill, standing tall, his cane beside him, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "Today," the old man said, "is the day of your final test." Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't know what the test was, but he knew it would define everything he had learned. His grandfather pointed down the familiar path. "The buckets are waiting for you down there." Ethan frowned. "Down the hill? But I've always started up here." The old man nodded. "Yes. Today, the challenge begins where you usually finish. Because life will often demand your strength when you think you have none left." Ethan took a deep breath and descended the path. At the bottom, he saw the 2 heavy buckets, the same ones he had carried day after day. But beside them was something new. A large stone, bigger than anything he had lifted before. Ethan stared at it, confused. Then his grandfather's voice echoed from above. "Your test is simple." He paused. "Carry the buckets and the stone all the way up." Ethan's chest tightened. "That's impossible." His grandfather responded calmly. "Impossible is a word for people who haven't met their true selves yet." Ethan swallowed hard. His arms were already trembling from nerves. He picked up the buckets first. They felt heavier than ever. Then he bent down to grab the stone. The moment his fingers touched it, he felt the weight of not just the rock, but of every failure he had ever lived. He struggled. The stone barely moved. Ethan shouted up the hill, "I can't do this." His grandfather's reply cut through the air. "Then you are still the same boy who arrived here." Ethan froze. Those words pierced him. He thought of the excuses he had broken, the wolves he had learned to feed, the candle of discipline he had kept burning, the steps he had taken even when he didn't want to. And suddenly, something shifted inside him. He grabbed the stone again. He lifted with everything he had. Every lesson, every tear, every moment of growth. The stone rose. Ethan held it against his chest, his arms burning, the buckets pulling at his sides. Step by step, inch by inch, breath by breath, he climbed. The hill felt steeper than ever. Every muscle screamed. The wind pushed against him. His vision blurred. Halfway up, he collapsed to his knees. The stone rolled from his hands. The buckets hit the ground. He gasped for air, trembling, defeated. His grandfather walked slowly down toward him. Ethan looked up, ashamed. "I failed." The old man knelt in front of him and smiled softly. "No, Ethan. This is the moment I have been waiting for." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Now ask yourself the only question that matters." Ethan whispered, "What is the next step?" His grandfather nodded. "Yes." Ethan inhaled sharply. His arms shaking, he grabbed the buckets. Then the stone. He rose to his feet, barely, but he rose. Then he took the next step. And another. And another. Until finally, exhausted, crying, shaking, he reached the top. His grandfather opened his arms. Ethan sat beside his grandfather at the top of the hill, breathing hard, his clothes damp with sweat and dust. His muscles trembled, but inside, he felt something he had never felt before. Strength. Not in his arms, not in his legs, but in his mind. His grandfather looked at him with eyes full of pride. "You have completed the final test," the old man said softly. "And now, Ethan, you are ready to hear the true secret." Ethan leaned forward. "I'm ready, Grandpa." The old man took a slow breath, then spoke in a calm, steady voice. "The secret to succeeding in life when motivation is gone is to build a life that does not depend on motivation at all." Ethan blinked. "What do you mean?" His grandfather pointed at the mountain path. You climbed that hill many times. Sometimes tired. Sometimes frustrated. Sometimes strong. Sometimes weak. He tapped Ethan's chest. But you climbed. Not because you felt motivated, but because you decided. He continued. Motivation is a spark, bright but brief. Discipline is a flame, steady and quiet. But identity is the fire that never dies. Ethan listened, breathless. His grandfather continued. You succeeded today not because you wanted to, but because you became someone who does not quit. He stood up, leaning on his cane. Ethan, my boy, your life will change the day you stop asking for motivation and start acting according to the identity you choose. Ethan whispered, My identity. The old man nodded. Yes. If you see yourself as someone who is lazy, you will act lazily. If you see yourself as someone who gives up, you will give up. But if you see yourself as someone disciplined, someone consistent, someone unstoppable, you will live that way. He smiled gently. The true secret, Ethan, is this. He raised a finger. You do not succeed because you feel motivated. You succeed because you build the identity of a person who succeeds. Ethan felt tears rise in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly who he wanted to be. His grandfather placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You are no longer the boy who waited for motivation. You are the man who creates his own path. Ethan stood up, feeling taller, stronger, new. Grandpa, thank you. You changed my life. The old man shook his head, smiling. No, Ethan. I only showed you the path. You walked it. And from now on, you will walk your own. They looked out at the mountains, vast, beautiful, endless. A world full of challenges. A world full of opportunities. Ethan smiled. For the first time ever, he wasn't afraid. He was ready.